Hello friends! In the world of high-stakes fraud, we have all heard the familiar stories of tycoons like Vijay Mallya and Nirav Modi. These men orchestrated financial schemes worth millions, and when the walls closed in, they fled the country to escape justice. Their stories are shocking, but they follow a certain predictable pattern of greed and escape. However, what if I told you about a fraudster who did not just flee the country after committing his crimes, but went a step further, a giant leap into the absurd by creating his very own country? Imagine a con artist so audacious that he establishes a sovereign nation, complete with all the trappings of a legitimate state, simply to build a fortress around his lies and continue his elaborate deception on a global scale. This is not the plot of a far-fetched thriller film. It is the very real and baffling story of Swami Nityananda and his phantom nation, the United States of Kailasa. This self-proclaimed Hindu nation emerged from the digital ether, a country with its own meticulously drafted constitution, a unique passport promising cosmic travel, a distinct national emblem, and even its own flag and a composed national anthem. The tale of Kailasa is a labyrinth of deceit, a spectacle so strange that it defies belief at every turn. It is the story of a fake Baba, a spiritual guru who managed to fool not only thousands of his devoted followers who hung on his every word, but also managed to deceive and infiltrate some of the highest international bodies, including the United Nations. Representatives of this non-existent country have stood on international platforms, addressing global committees with a straight face, weaving a narrative of persecution and divine purpose that left the world both stunned and bewildered. The scam did not stop at the UN. The tendrils of this bizarre operation reached far and wide, snaring dozens of American and South American politicians, city officials, and even indigenous communities in the Amazon rainforest. These officials were tricked into signing sister city agreements and memorandums of understanding, lending an air of legitimacy to a country that existed only on a website and in the minds of its followers. Kailasa represents what can arguably be called the biggest, most elaborate, and most astonishing spiritual scam the world has ever witnessed. It is a cautionary tale about the potent combination of blind faith, sophisticated digital manipulation, and the exploitation of religious sentiment for personal gain and protection from the law. The story of Nithyananda is not just about a man, it is a profound exploration of how easily belief can be weaponized in the modern age. It reveals the vulnerabilities within our global systems, showing how a determined charlatan can exploit loopholes in international diplomacy and the goodwill of unsuspecting officials. How could a man accused of heinous crimes, including rape and child abuse, reinvent himself as the supreme pontiff of a new Hindu nation? This introduction will set the stage for this incredible saga, delving into the origins of this grand illusion and tracing the path of a fugitive who transformed himself from a disgraced godman into the ruler of a digital empire, a journey that challenges our very understanding of what is real and what is a fabrication. The journey into the bizarre world of Nithyananda is punctuated by claims so outlandish they border on the surreal. This is a man who has managed to build an empire on a foundation of pure, unadulterated nonsense, yet delivered with such conviction that it captivated thousands. Consider his assertion that when he was merely 12 years old, his body underwent a profound genetic mutation. As a consequence of this supposed biological anomaly, he declared himself to be neither male nor female, a non-biological entity existing beyond the conventional understanding of human anatomy. This claim conveniently served as a defense against the numerous sexual assault allegations that would later plague him, a shield of supposed divinity and biological exceptionalism designed to deflect any accusations of earthly misconduct and portray him as a being above human frailties and desires. His fantastical pronouncements did not end with his own biology. In a moment of supreme confidence in September 2018, Nithyananda made a promise that left the world scratching its head in disbelief. He declared that within a single year, he would achieve a scientific and spiritual breakthrough of monumental proportions. He would teach animals to speak, not just any language, but the ancient and sacred languages of Tamil and Sanskrit. We are going to have bulls and cows which will talk to you very clearly, he announced to his followers legitimately, in Sanskrit and Tamil. He even claimed to have developed a special software for this purpose, a technological marvel that would bridge the communication gap between humans and the animal kingdom, a feat that would make him a pioneer in interspecies dialogue. This pattern of making incredible, unverifiable claims was a cornerstone of his strategy to maintain control over his followers and attract new ones. He positioned himself not just as a spiritual guide, but as a master of the cosmos, a being with powers that defied science and logic. He once publicly stated that Albert Einstein's famous equation, E equals mc squared, was fundamentally incorrect, casually dismissing one of the pillars of modern physics without offering any alternative theory. In another instance, he proposed a ludicrous business idea aimed at billionaires like Bill Gates and Warren Buffett. He suggested they entrust half their wealth to him in an incarnation trust, which he would then safeguard and deliver back to them in their next life, after using a Jiv Atma GPS to track their reincarnated souls, taking a hefty 25% commission for his services. These claims were not merely laughable, some of them took a darker, more sinister turn. At one point he chillingly suggested that 20% of the world's population plays no significant role and should therefore be eliminated. He argued that this would not be an act of violence, but a necessary surgery for the betterment of humanity. This blend of the absurd and the alarming created a cult of personality around him, where followers were conditioned to accept any statement, no matter how wild or disturbing, as the profound wisdom of a divine being. This theater of the bizarre was instrumental in building the myth of Nithyananda, a myth so powerful it would eventually allow him to construct an entire phantom nation around himself. The creation of the United States of Kailasa was the magnum opus of Nithyananda's career as a con artist. After fleeing India in 2019 to evade prosecution for a growing list of criminal charges, including rape, kidnapping, and torture, he did not simply go into hiding. Instead, he orchestrated a spectacular reinvention. From an undisclosed location, he announced the birth of his new country, a safe haven for persecuted Hindus from around the world. This was a masterstroke of manipulation, co-opting the narrative of religious victimhood to rebrand himself as a savior rather than a fugitive. The country was named after Mount Kailash in Tibet, a site of immense sacred significance in Hinduism, thereby cloaking his fraudulent enterprise in a veil of profound religious sanctity and appealing directly to the sentiments of the Hindu diaspora. The digital manifestation of Kailasa was executed with astonishing professionalism. A sophisticated website was launched, presenting Kailasa as a fully functional sovereign state. It had everything: a digital passport that promised visa-free travel to all 11 dimensions and 14 lokas, a reserve bank with its own currency called the Kalashian dollar, and a government with 18 distinct departments, supposedly based on ancient Vedic principles. The illusion was so complete that it offered free e-citizenship to anyone who was a practicing Hindu. In just a few clicks, people could become citizens of this new digital Hindu nation. Shockingly, the Kailasa website claims that over 12 million people applied for this e-citizenship, a testament to how many were willing to believe in this grand, digitally constructed fantasy. This elaborate online presence was just the first step. To gain international credibility, Nithyananda dispatched his most loyal followers, now rebranded as diplomats and ambassadors of Kailasa, to engage with real-world political entities. These representatives, armed with false stories and fabricated credentials, successfully managed to meet with officials from numerous countries and cities. Photos of these meetings were then proudly displayed on social media, creating a feedback loop of perceived legitimacy. The scam reached its absolute peak in February 2023, when a woman named Vijayapriya Nityananda appeared at a United Nations committee meeting in Geneva, introducing herself as the permanent ambassador of the United States of Kailasa. She proceeded to accuse India of persecuting her supreme pontiff, Nityananda, turning an international forum into a stage for his fabricated narrative. The audacity of the Kailasa project was breathtaking. Its representatives duped the city of Newark, New Jersey into signing a sister city agreement, an accord that was hastily rescinded once the truth came to light and the mayor admitted to the embarrassing oversight. In Paraguay, a government official was fired after signing a memorandum of understanding to explore diplomatic relations with the Phantom Nation. These incidents reveal a startling truth. Nithyananda had created a scam so convincing on the surface that it could bypass the due diligence of established governments. This was not just a man hiding from the law, this was a man actively trying to build a parallel reality, a sovereign shield built from lies, donations from the gullible, and the sheer, unmitigated gall to declare a country into existence. To truly understand how a man could eventually declare himself the ruler of a phantom country, we must journey back to his origins, to a time before the scandals, the escape, and the international notoriety. The story of Swami Nityananda begins on January 1, 1978, in the temple town of Tiruvannamalai, Tamil Nadu. A boy named Arunakalam Rajasekaran was born into what appeared to be an ordinary life. Publicly available information about his early years is scarce, a void that he himself has eagerly filled with a carefully constructed mythology of divine precociousness. This narrative is crucial, as it lays the very foundation upon which his entire spiritual empire would later be built. It is a story designed to portray him not as a man who chose a path, but as a being who was destined for spiritual greatness from his very first breath. According to Nithyananda's own hagiography, his spiritual journey began at an astonishingly young age. He claims that by the tender age of 10, while meditating on the sacred Arunachala hill, a place steeped in spiritual lore, he had his first profound divine experience. This wasn't merely a moment of childish imagination, it was presented as a genuine communion with the cosmic, a sign that he was no ordinary child. This narrative of early enlightenment is a classic trope among self-proclaimed godmen, as it establishes an innate, God-given authority that cannot be questioned or academically verified. It conveniently sidesteps the need for a traditional lineage or rigorous training, replacing it with a story of a child prodigy touched by the divine, a narrative that is both compelling and impossible to disprove. The official biography continues with claims of academic achievement, stating that he earned a diploma in mechanical engineering. However, this worldly pursuit was supposedly short-lived. At the age of 17, following the death of his guru, he allegedly renounced the material world and embarked on a nomadic life as a sannyasi, or Hindu monk. This period of wandering is another essential element of his myth-making, portraying him as a seeker who traveled the length and breadth of India, absorbing ancient wisdom and honing his spiritual powers. This journey culminated in the year 2000, when he was ready to share his enlightened vision with the world. He inaugurated his very first ashram in Tamil Nadu, no longer Arunachalam Rajasekaran, but Swami Nityananda, a name that would soon echo far beyond his hometown. This transformation from a boy with an engineering diploma to a saffron-clad guru was meticulously crafted. Each element of his backstory, the divine childhood experience, the renunciation of worldly life, the pilgrimage across India, served a specific purpose. It was designed to create an aura of mystique and authenticity that would attract followers seeking spiritual guidance. He was not just a teacher, he was presented as a living embodiment of the spiritual path, a figure who had walked the arduous road to enlightenment and returned to lead others. This carefully curated origin story was the initial critical investment in the brand of Nithyananda, a brand that would soon grow into a multi-million-dollar global enterprise built on the shaky grounds of belief and charisma. Nithyananda's rise hinged on his electrifying oratory, wild gestures, dramatic tones, and a blend of pseudoscience and spiritual jargon. He promised miracles, curing diseases, awakening kundalini, even levitation, never with proof, but always with conviction. His real genius was switching to English, targeting India's urban elite and a global audience, making ancient ideas sound modern and accessible. By 2003, his ashrams multiplied, with the Bidadi Center near Bengaluru as his empire's crown jewel. Each sermon drew more believers, convinced they'd found a living God. Nithyananda's ashrams became self-contained worlds, drawing in followers who surrendered their lives and finances. His English sermons and online presence built a global network, especially in the US, bringing legitimacy and foreign donations. Spirituality became a business. Workshops, retreats, and miracle programs raked in millions. Followers were taught to abandon critical thinking, elevating him to unquestioned divinity. This cult-like devotion fueled his rapid rise, setting the stage for scandal. In 2010, a leaked video shattered Nithyananda's image of purity, sparking outrage and exposing hypocrisy. He denied everything, spinning bizarre tales of genetic mutations and conspiracies, but the truth emerged. Former devotee R.T. Rao exposed his crimes. More women came forward with stories of abuse, and the ashram's dark side surfaced. Arrested and jailed, Nithyananda's followers saw him as a persecuted martyr, not a criminal. The foundation of blind faith held strong, even as his empire began to crack. Most would fall after such scandal, but Nithyananda returned, recasting himself as a victim of religious persecution. His followers, conditioned to see him as divine, rallied. Donations and devotion surged. He masterfully turned legal battles into a crusade, painting critics as enemies of Hinduism. The business of spirituality thrived, his narrative overpowering facts. In his world, truth was whatever he declared it to be. Tragedy struck again in 2014. A young woman died mysteriously at his ashram, but his popularity barely wavered. Behind the scenes, legal pressure mounted as authorities built their case. Nithyananda, aided by loyalists like Sarah Landry, plotted his escape as allegations of abuse and mistreatment grew. Landry's disillusionment revealed the ashram's horrors: starved children, forced violence. As scandals multiplied, Nithyananda's world teetered on collapse, his pronouncements growing ever more desperate. As the legal noose tightened around him in India, Nithyananda's behavior grew increasingly erratic, a desperate attempt to maintain his godlike image while secretly plotting his escape. Amidst these plans, in 2019, another explosive case erupted. A man from Tamil Nadu named Janardhan Sharma, who had once been a loyal devotee, filed a shocking complaint. He accused Nithyananda of illegally confining his 2 minor daughters at his ashram in Ahmedabad, effectively kidnapping them and refusing to let them return to their family. This added yet another serious charge to the growing list of crimes Nithyananda was accused of, including rape, torture, and now, the unlawful imprisonment of children. The case brought renewed media attention and public outrage. The court system, running out of patience with his constant evasions, summoned him for hearings more than 50 times. But Nithyananda never appeared. He treated the judicial process with utter contempt, ignoring every summons and refusing to cooperate with the investigation. The authorities were left with no choice but to escalate their actions. In November 2019, the Gujarat police, armed with an arrest warrant, raided his Ahmedabad ashram with the intention of finally taking him into custody. They searched the sprawling complex thoroughly, but the self-proclaimed God-man was nowhere to be found. He had vanished into thin air, leaving behind only his bewildered followers and a trail of unanswered questions. It was soon confirmed that Nithyananda had successfully fled the country, becoming an international fugitive. Reports later pieced together his escape route. According to an investigation by Money Control, he had traveled by road from Gujarat to Gorakhpur in Uttar Pradesh. From there, he slipped across the porous border into neighboring Nepal. It was in Nepal that he allegedly procured a fake passport under a false identity. This fraudulent document was his golden ticket, allowing him to board a flight and travel to the Americas, far from the reach of Indian law enforcement. He had successfully executed a well-planned escape, leaving the Indian authorities to deal with the embarrassing reality of a high-profile criminal slipping through their fingers. Safely ensconced in his new undisclosed location, Nithyananda did not remain silent. He soon released a video, not to apologize or explain, but to double down on his delusions of divinity. In a defiant and arrogant message to the world, he boldly declared that he was, in fact, Paramashiva, the supreme form of the Hindu deity Lord Shiva. He taunted the authorities, proclaiming that no one could ever get to him anymore, and that no stupid court had the power to prosecute him for revealing his true divine nature. This was his ultimate act of defiance, transforming his escape from justice into a divine ascension, a final desperate attempt to rewrite his narrative from that of a criminal fugitive to a persecuted god. Just a few days after his audacious declaration of divinity, in December 2019, Nithyananda unveiled his most ambitious and honestly bizarre project yet. He announced to the world that he had established his very own independent sovereign country, the United States of Kailasa. Now, this wasn't just some spiritual community, it was presented as a full-fledged nation-state, a global homeland for Hindus. He claimed its mission was to protect, preserve, and revive the ancient Hindu civilization, which he argued was under threat. He was, deploying the same old script, the same tired narrative of religious persecution that had served him so well in the past. If politicians could use the Hindus in danger rhetoric to further their own agendas, he must have reasoned, then why couldn't a fake Baba use it to build himself a kingdom? He chose the name Kailasa quite deliberately, aiming to co-opt the immense spiritual power associated with Mount Kailash in Tibet, which is, of course, one of the most sacred sites in Hinduism, revered as the earthly abode of Lord Shiva. By naming his phantom nation after this holy mountain, he was basically attempting to bestow upon his fraudulent enterprise an immediate and profound sense of legitimacy and sanctity in the eyes of his followers. Initial media reports, as you might expect, ran wild with speculation, suggesting that Nithyananda had purchased a private island off the coast of the South American nation of Ecuador, and was establishing his new country there. The story gained international traction, with news outlets across the globe reporting on the fugitive godman's private island nation. As the story became a major international headline, the government of Ecuador was actually forced to issue a formal denial. Ecuadorian officials acknowledged that Nityananda had indeed visited their country and had even applied for asylum, but they flatly stated that his request had been denied and that he was not present in their territory. They made it absolutely clear that no island had been sold to him or his organization. This official statement, honestly, created a new mystery. If Kailasa was not on an island near Ecuador, then where on earth was it? Where was Swami Nityananda actually hiding? The physical location of this supposed country became a subject of intense speculation and investigation by journalists and law enforcement agencies worldwide. The truth, as revealed by a 2-year-old report from the Indian Ministry of External Affairs, was far less glamorous but equally audacious. Officials believed that he had not purchased any island at all. The physical nation of Kailasa simply did not exist. In reality, Nityananda was likely hiding in plain sight, possibly in the United States. It was suspected that he was attempting to build a new base of operations in California, where he already had a large office in San Jose and a significant number of devoted followers. The country of Kailasa, it seemed, was not a place you could find on a map. It was a country of the mind, a digital illusion, and a front for a massive international financial scam. Once safely in America, Nityananda immediately began leveraging his network of non-resident Indian followers and other devotees. He reached out to them, not as a fugitive, but as the supreme leader of a new Hindu nation, and asked them to donate generously to fund the establishment of Kailasa. Even in developed countries like the United States and Canada, he had cultivated a large and loyal following of blind devotees over the years. While many people he approached instantly recognized him as a fraud and a charlatan, others were completely taken in by his powerful rhetoric. They were swayed by his grand talks of reviving Hindu civilization and his claims that Hindus were in danger, and they were manipulated into donating millions of rupees to his cause. It's truly staggering, to think about how easily some people, even highly educated and successful individuals, can be fooled by such tactics. One of Nityananda's most prominent financial backers was reportedly the former CEO of a top Indian IT company. This individual publicly defended Nityananda, arguing that he was not a criminal but a noble propagator of Hinduism who was being unfairly targeted by anti-Hindu forces. This, honestly, demonstrates a dangerous vulnerability. No matter how heinous the crimes of a murderer, rapist, or terrorist, if they wrap themselves in the flag of religion and claim their accusers are enemies of the faith, there will be people willing to believe them, defend them, and give them money. This influx of cash was laundered and channeled through a network of non-governmental organizations. Within a single year, at least 13 new NGOs linked to Nityananda were established in the US, the UK, and across Asia, with a staggering 10 of them based in the United States alone. Since donations to registered NGOs are legally permissible, this complex financial structure allowed him to collect and utilize funds for his activities abroad in a seemingly legitimate manner. The money received from these naive but wealthy donors, funneled through this web of nonprofits, was used to build the digital foundations of Kailasa and present it to the world as a real independent country. This digital nation was constructed with meticulous attention to detail. On social media and across the internet, a powerful and slick presence for Kailasa was aggressively promoted. Digitally, Kailasa was given all the attributes that a real country possesses. It was furnished with its own distinctive flag, a detailed constitution, a unique passport design, a national emblem, and even its own professionally composed national anthem. The official website was designed to look professional and authoritative, creating a convincing illusion of a legitimate state. This digital kingdom, built on lies and funded by the deluded, was Nityananda's new fortress, a virtual shield to protect him from the real world and the real crimes he had left behind in India. With the Indian judicial system closing in, Nityananda's elaborate facade of spiritual invincibility was beginning to crack, forcing him to orchestrate the most critical performance of his life, his escape. The trial for the rape cases was set to begin in 2018, a development that signaled the end of his ability to endlessly delay justice. This imminent threat spurred him into action, transforming him from a spiritual guru into a meticulous escape artist. In August 2018, a key devotee, a Canadian woman named Sarah Landry, became an instrumental part of his plan. She actively assisted him in seeking political asylum in Canada, a move designed to create a legal buffer and a potential safe haven should he need to flee India. This was the first concrete step in his international exit strategy. Sarah Landry, like many others, had been one of Nithyananda's most ardent and loyal followers, completely captivated by his charisma and teachings. However, her devotion was not absolute. The turning point for her came when she was exposed to the dark underbelly of Nithyananda's educational institutions, the Gurukuls. She discovered disturbing evidence that children in these schools were being subjected to horrific abuse. They were allegedly starved as a form of discipline and coerced into inflicting violence upon one another. This shocking revelation shattered her blind faith, allowing her to see the guru she worshipped not as a divine being, but as a manipulative and cruel leader. This personal crisis of faith coincided with the mounting legal pressure on Nithyananda, creating a perfect storm. The escape itself was a carefully planned route designed to evade detection. According to a detailed report by Money Control, Nithyananda's journey out of India was not a direct flight but a clandestine, multi-stage operation. He first traveled by road across the country to Gorakhpur, a city in Uttar Pradesh, located near the border. From there, he slipped across into Nepal, a country with a relatively porous border with India, making it a common route for fugitives. This overland journey was a calculated risk, allowing him to avoid the scrutiny of airport immigration and security checks, where his high-profile identity would have immediately raised red flags and led to his certain arrest by the authorities. Once in Nepal, Nithyananda executed the final and most crucial part of his plan. He allegedly obtained a fake passport, a fraudulent document that would scrub his real identity and allow him to travel internationally without being flagged as a fugitive from Indian justice. Armed with this new identity, he was able to board a flight and make his way to the Americas. This successful escape was a major embarrassment for the Indian authorities, highlighting the ease with which a high-profile accused criminal could simply vanish. Nithyananda had successfully reinvented himself from a godman on trial to an international man of mystery, setting the stage for his next even more audacious act. As the legal walls closed in around him, Nithyananda's public pronouncements became increasingly unhinged, a desperate attempt to distract from his impending legal battles and reinforce his image as a being beyond mortal comprehension. His claims escalated from the merely grandiose to the utterly preposterous. In September 2018, he made a declaration that captured global attention for its sheer absurdity. He announced to his followers and the world that he was on the verge of a revolutionary breakthrough within a year. He would teach animals to speak. And he wasn't talking about parrots mimicking human speech, but a genuine cognitive linguistic ability in animals like bulls and cows, who would converse fluently in classical languages. "We are going to have bulls and cows which will talk to you very clearly," he proclaimed with absolute seriousness in a now infamous video, legitimately in Sanskrit and Tamil. This was not presented as a spiritual metaphor, he actually framed it as a technological achievement. He claimed to have already developed a specialized software to facilitate this interspecies communication, asserting that he had tested the prototype and it was perfectly working. This bizarre promise was a calculated move to position himself not just as a spiritual master, but as a scientific genius whose capabilities far surpassed the mainstream scientific community, creating a narrative where he operated on a completely different plane of reality. This pattern of making outlandish claims was a core part of his defense mechanism. It served to create a smokescreen of such thick and bewildering nonsense that the serious criminal allegations against him seemed almost mundane by comparison. I mean, how could a man developing software to talk to cows be bothered with earthly matters like court dates and legal summons? It really was a strategy of radical distraction. In another instance, he casually dismissed one of the foundational principles of modern physics, Albert Einstein's iconic equation, E equals mc squared. Scientists and their theories, he scoffed, I'm E equal to not mc squared. He offered no proof, no alternative theory, just a blanket dismissal from his self-proclaimed superior intellect. These pronouncements were designed to keep his followers in a state of constant awe and confusion, reinforcing their belief that they were in the presence of a being whose wisdom was beyond their understanding. For his devotees, these statements were not lies or delusions, they were profound truths that the uninitiated world was simply not ready to comprehend. This constant barrage of the bizarre made it easier for them to dismiss the criminal charges against him, as the jealous machinations of a mundane world that could not grasp his divine mission. His claims were not just speeches, they were building blocks for the alternate reality he was constructing for himself and his followers. Nithyananda's grandiloquence was not confined to the animal kingdom or theoretical physics. It also extended into the world of high finance, where he hatched a business proposal of, well, cosmic proportions. In a conversation with author Rajiv Malhotra, he outlined a bizarre and audacious plan aimed at the world's wealthiest individuals, specifically naming titans like Bill Gates and Warren Buffett. He proposed the creation of an incarnation trust. The idea was that these billionaires would entrust half of their immense fortunes, in Gates' case a neat $50 billion, to him. He in turn would hold this wealth in trust and deliver it back to them in their next life, ensuring their financial security across reincarnations. The mechanics of this proposed spiritual finance scheme were as detailed as they were, honestly, ludicrous. Nithyananda claimed that his organization possessed the technology to track a person's soul, or Jiva Atma, after death. "We'll follow the Jiva Atma GPS, he explained with a straight face, and where he is born, they go there and give him his money. For providing this unique and invaluable service, his organization would take a modest 25% commission. He even offered a premium service. If a client wished to choose their place of birth in the next life, the fee would increase to 50%. This was the ultimate con, blending Hindu concepts of reincarnation with modern technological jargon to pitch a fraudulent service to the world's most astute businessmen. This demonstrated the boundless nature of his confidence. He had become so comfortable and successful at fooling his followers that he genuinely seemed to believe he could now deceive the likes of Bill Gates and Mukesh Ambani. He was no longer just a spiritual guru, he was an aspiring cosmic investment banker, promising returns that spanned lifetimes. The sheer audacity of suggesting that he could track souls with a spiritual GPS and that this was a viable business model reveals a mind completely detached from reality, or one so deeply enmeshed in the art of the con that no mark seemed too big or too intelligent to target. Some of his claims, however, veered from the comically absurd to the deeply disturbing. In one chilling pronouncement, he advocated for a form of global eugenics. He argued that roughly 20% of the people in any given community are not responsible, and that if this number grows, they need to be eliminated. When questioned if he truly meant eliminated, he confirmed it, chillingly reframing mass murder as a necessary surgery for the health of society. This was the darker side of his reinvention, a man who, while spinning tales of talking cows and soul-tracking technology, was also capable of espousing dangerous and violent ideologies, all under the protective guise of divine wisdom. While Nithyananda was busy weaving his fantastical tales for a global audience, his empire in India was finally beginning to crumble. In 2019, a new and damning accusation emerged that would accelerate his downfall. Janardhan Sharma, a man from Tamil Nadu who had once been a devoted follower, came forward with a heart-wrenching plea. He accused Nithyananda and his ashram in Ahmedabad of holding his two minor daughters captive. He claimed they were being brainwashed and prevented from returning to their family, effectively adding kidnapping and wrongful confinement of minors to the fugitive guru's already extensive charge sheet. This case struck a raw nerve with the public and brought intense new scrutiny upon his organization. The legal system, which had been patient with Nithyananda's evasive tactics for years, finally lost its tolerance. He was summoned to appear in court on more than 50 separate occasions. Yet he never showed up. He treated the judiciary with blatant contempt, ignoring every single summons. His consistent failure to appear was a clear indication that he had no intention of facing justice. The breaking point came in November 2019. Frustrated by his continued absence, the Gujarat police obtained a warrant and descended upon his Ahmedabad ashram. They conducted a thorough search of the sprawling property, hoping to finally apprehend the fugitive godman. However, their efforts were in vain. They found no trace of him anywhere. He had vanished like a ghost, leaving behind confused devotees and unanswered questions. It was later confirmed that Nithyananda had successfully fled the country, making a mockery of the law enforcement agencies. His escape marked the end of his physical presence in India, but it was far from the end of his story. He had managed to outmaneuver the authorities, trading his life as a guru on trial for that of an international fugitive. By fleeing, he was sending a clear message. He believed he was above the law. His disappearance set the stage for his most ambitious reinvention yet, one that would take place far from Indian soil, in the borderless realm of the internet. After managing to escape the grip of Indian law, Nithyananda didn't just disappear into obscurity or lead a quiet life in hiding. Instead, he actually reappeared online, bolder than ever before. From some hidden, secure location, he started releasing a series of videos to his followers, not to explain his absence as a fugitive, but to make a grand, divine proclamation. In one of his most defiant broadcasts, he stared straight into the camera and said he was finally ready to reveal a truth he'd kept secret for a long time. With absolute conviction, he declared himself to be Paramashiva, the highest primordial form of the Hindu god Shiva, the creator and destroyer of the universe. This was, honestly, the ultimate act of reinvention. He was no longer just a guru or spiritual leader, he was, in his words, God himself. This declaration had a double effect. For his followers, it was the final confirmation of his divinity, explaining all his persecution and escape as part of some cosmic drama that ordinary people just couldn't understand. And for the authorities he'd run from, it was an act of pure contempt. He openly taunted them, saying that no stupid court could ever prosecute him for the truth of his divinity. He claimed he was now beyond their reach, not just physically, but cosmically. He'd lifted himself to a place where human laws and justice simply didn't matter anymore. But this wasn't the end of his announcements. Just a few days later, in December 2019, Nithyananda claimed to have founded his own sovereign nation, the United States of Kailasa. It was, in a way, the logical, though completely bizarre, next step in his god complex. If he was Paramashiva, then obviously he needed a kingdom. He pitched Kailasa as a revivalist project, a nation meant to preserve and spread a pure form of Hinduism for Hindus around the world. He played the victim again, framing Kailasa as a safe haven for Hindus facing persecution everywhere, and of course, he painted himself as the prime example of that persecution. This was the start of his most far-reaching scam yet. The man accused of rape, torture, and kidnapping had managed to rebrand himself, at least in the eyes of his followers, as the supreme pontiff of a new Hindu nation. Suddenly, his escape wasn't about running from justice, it was a holy pilgrimage to establish a sacred land. The transformation was complete. He had left behind his identity as Aruna Kalam Rajasekaran, and even as Swami Nityananda. Now, he was his divine holiness, Nithyananda Paramashivam, ruler of a phantom country, ready to build a new empire, this time on a global stage. With Nithyananda now out of India and proclaiming himself a divine sovereign, the next logical move in his massive deception was to give his new kingdom a real, tangible presence. But since he didn't actually have any land, he turned to the only place where borders don't really exist, and reality is, well, whatever you make it, the internet. Using the huge sums of money he'd collected from his devoted and often wealthy followers, especially through his network of NGOs in the US and abroad, Nithyananda set out to create a powerful, sophisticated online presence for Kailasa. This wasn't just some basic blog or a random social media page. No, it was a professionally designed, multi-layered digital ecosystem, all aimed at projecting the image of a real, functioning, modern nation-state to the world. The heart of this digital nation was its official website. With slick graphics, a polished layout, and authoritative language, the website became the main gateway into the world of Kailasa. It was carefully crafted to look just like the official government websites of actual countries, complete with sections on Kailasa's history, mission, government structure, and services. The site was packed with high-resolution photos of Nithyananda dressed in regal attire, testimonials from supposed citizens, and press releases boasting about Kailasa's latest achievements. Honestly, the whole thing was a masterclass in propaganda, creating an illusion so convincing that it could fool a casual visitor and, of course, reinforce the faith of his die-hard followers. But it didn't stop at the website. Nithyananda's team launched a full-blown digital media blitz, setting up official accounts for Kailasa's government, its different ministries, and even its embassies on every major social media platform. They started their own online TV channel and a digital newspaper called the all churning out a constant stream of content pushing the narrative of Kailasa as a thriving Hindu nation under its supreme pontiff. This non-stop flow of information created a digital echo chamber where the existence and legitimacy of Kailasa were repeated so often that they started to feel real, at least to those inside the bubble. This strong digital presence was really the foundation of the Kailasa scam. Nithyananda understood that in the 21st century, perception can be more powerful than reality. If he could make a digital nation that looked and felt real, he could use that illusion as leverage in the actual world. The website, the social media, the online news, they weren't just for show. They were strategic tools to recruit more followers, collect donations, and eventually try to get the international recognition he so desperately wanted. Kailasa was born as a .org nation, a kingdom built not on land but on servers and code. It was a testament to just how powerful digital fabrication can be in our modern age. To make his digital nation seem truly authentic, Nithyananda knew that a fancy website alone wouldn't cut it. Every real country has its own symbols, powerful emblems that represent its identity, its people, and its sovereignty. So, with a lot of attention to detail, he had a whole set of national symbols created for the United States of Kailasa. The first and most visible of these was the national flag. This flag actually features Nithyananda himself, sitting on a tiger skin in a meditative pose, right on top of an image of Mount Kailash. Next to him is Nandi, the sacred bull and vehicle of Lord Shiva. This design wasn't just random, it was a deliberate move to put himself at the very center of his new nation's identity, basically equating his own image with that of a god. Then came the creation of a national passport, which honestly might be the boldest part of the entire scam. The Kailasan passport is this golden-hued booklet with the nation's emblem on the cover, and it's not just meant to be a travel document for a country that doesn't exist. According to the Kailasa website, this passport promises something way bigger. It claims to give its holder free entry, not just to the physical and still secret land of Kailasa, but to all 11 dimensions and 14 lokas, which are the various spiritual realms described in Hindu cosmology. This was honestly a stroke of manipulative genius, combining the official look of a passport with the spiritual promise of cosmic travel, a perk no other country could ever offer. The branding didn't stop there. They also created a national emblem and even composed a national anthem. The emblem, like the flag, was full of religious imagery, with Nithyananda right at the center. The anthem was professionally produced, with lyrics praising both the glory of Hindu Dharma and the divine wisdom of Nithyananda himself. All of these, proudly displayed on the website, helped create a complete and convincing national identity. These symbols were vital for maintaining the illusion. When new recruits or potential donors landed on the website, they weren't just greeted by text. They saw the flag, could imagine holding the passport, and even listen to the anthem. This sensory experience made it easier for people to suspend disbelief and get drawn deeper into the fantasy. Nithyananda wasn't just building a website, he was building a brand. He was using the classic tools of nation building, flags, anthems, emblems, to give his digital kingdom a soul, making it that much easier for people to believe in and invest in his grand deception. No nation, whether real or digital, is really complete without its own economy, right? So, to further solidify the illusion of Kailasa as a sovereign state, Nithyananda announced the establishment of its own comprehensive financial system. This included the creation of the Reserve Bank of Kailasa, a central banking institution that he claimed was a legitimate body that exists in that country and it functions there. This fictional reserve bank was presented as the steward of Kailasa's economic policy, responsible for managing the nation's wealth and issuing its currency. Now, the announcement was made with all the gravity of a real finance minister, complete with official-looking documents and press releases, all designed to project an image of financial stability and legitimacy. The cornerstone of this phantom economy was its own currency, the Kailashian dollar. To give this currency a veneer of value and stability, Nithyananda pegged it to a tangible asset. He declared that one Kailashian dollar would always be equivalent in value to 1 tola of gold, which is, approximately 11.7 grams. This was a clever move, honestly, because it made the currency sound stable and valuable, unlike those volatile fiat currencies. But of course, these Kailashian dollars were never actually minted or printed. They existed only as a concept, just a number on a digital ledger within the closed ecosystem of Kailasa. Still, the claim itself was enough to impress his followers and create the illusion of a robust economic foundation. The economic plans didn't stop with just a central bank and a currency. The Kailasa website detailed a full-fledged economic vision, outlining departments for treasury, commerce, and trade. It spoke of creating a dharma-based economy, free from the corruption and greed of the modern capitalist world. This narrative really appealed to those who were disillusioned with the existing global financial system, offering them a vision of an ethical and spiritual alternative. The website even claimed that Kailasa was open for international investment, inviting people to contribute to its economic development, a thinly veiled and ongoing solicitation for donations to fund Nithyananda's fugitive lifestyle. This entire economic framework was a complete fabrication, a house of cards built on grand pronouncements and digital graphics. There was no reserve bank, no gold backing, and no real currency. It was all part of the elaborate stage play, a set of props designed to make the phantom nation of Kailasa appear more real. For Nithyananda, the purpose of this illusory economy was twofold. It added another layer of legitimacy to his scam, making it more believable to outsiders. More importantly, it provided a new and official-sounding mechanism for soliciting money from his followers, who could now be convinced they weren't just donating, but investing in the sacred economy of a divine Hindu nation. To elevate his status from a mere head of state to a figure of global religious importance, Nithyananda devised a brilliant and honestly pretty blasphemous strategy. He positioned Kailasa as the Hindu equivalent of the Vatican City. The Vatican is internationally recognized as the sovereign territory of the Holy See, the central governing body of the Catholic Church, led by the Pope. By mimicking this structure, Nithyananda aimed to claim a similar kind of authority for himself within Hinduism. On its website, Kailasa is explicitly described as the Vatican of Hinduism, a bold and unauthorized claim designed to hijack the structure of one of the world's most established religions and apply it to his own cult. This comparison wasn't just a passing remark, it was deeply embedded in the supposed governance of Kailasa. The country, the website claims, is run by the Sovereign Order of Kailasa, Nithyananda, or SOKN for short. This name was directly inspired by the Holy See, the governing body of the Vatican. By creating this parallel structure, Nithyananda was attempting to manufacture a formal, institutional authority that simply does not exist in the diverse and decentralized traditions of Hinduism. He was trying to create a central seat of power for an entire religion, with the clear intention of placing himself at its head, thereby making himself the de facto Pope of Hinduism. This self-aggrandizement was a core element of his reinvention. Nithyananda bestowed upon himself the title of Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism, a position that he completely invented. Unlike the Catholic Church, Hinduism has no single supreme leader or central authority. It is a vast and varied faith with countless traditions, lineages, and respected spiritual leaders. By anointing himself with this papal-sounding title, Nithyananda was making a brazen power grab, attempting to usurp the authority of all other gurus and institutions, and present himself to the world as the sole, ultimate representative of over 1 billion Hindus. It was a move of breathtaking arrogance, designed to mislead his followers and confuse international observers. This strategy was aimed at creating a shield of religious legitimacy. If the world could be convinced that he was the Hindu Pope and Kailasa was the Hindu Vatican, then any legal action or criticism against him could be more easily dismissed as an attack on Hinduism itself. It was the same tactic he had used in India, but now scaled up for a global audience. He was wrapping his criminal enterprise in the most sacred cloth he could find, hoping that the world would be too hesitant or too ignorant to challenge a figure claiming to be the supreme leader of a major world religion. It was honestly a cynical and manipulative ploy to co-opt the reverence of an ancient faith for his own personal protection. A country, even a digital one, needs a population. To solve this problem, Nithyananda and his organization made a grand and open offer to the world, the chance to become an official citizen of the United States of Kailasa. On the nation's website, a prominent link invited visitors to apply for e-citizenship. The process was made to look official but was incredibly simple. With just a few clicks and by filling out a basic form, anyone could supposedly receive their digital citizenship. And the best part? It was offered completely free of cost. This was a low-barrier, high-reward proposition for those intrigued by the project, a way to join a new and exciting spiritual nation without any financial commitment. There were, however, a few stated requirements. The primary condition for citizenship, according to the website, was that the applicant must be a practicing Hindu who was persecuted in their own country. This framing was a strategic masterstroke. It tapped directly into the narrative of Hindu victimhood that Nithyananda had been carefully cultivating for years. It positioned Kailasa not just as a new country but as a sanctuary, a safe haven for followers of the faith who felt marginalized or threatened. This appeal resonated deeply with certain segments of the Hindu diaspora and individuals in India who were receptive to the idea that their religion was under siege. The response to this offer, if Kailasa's own claims are to be believed, was nothing short of staggering. The website proudly boasts that more than 12 million people from around the world have applied for this e-citizenship. While this number is almost certainly a wild exaggeration, a piece of propaganda designed to create a sense of momentum and popularity, it raises a profoundly disturbing question. Is it really this easy to fool so many people in the name of religion? Even if the true number is a small fraction of what is claimed, it still represents a significant number of individuals who are willing to pledge allegiance to a phantom nation run by a fugitive accused of heinous crimes. This e-citizenship drive served several critical purposes for Nithyananda. Firstly, it created a database of potential donors and committed followers, a list of people who could be targeted for future fundraising campaigns. Secondly, it allowed him to claim that Kailasa had a permanent population, one of the key criteria for statehood under international law, even if that population was scattered across the globe. Most importantly, it reinforced the illusion. For those who received their digital citizenship certificate, Kailasa became a little more real, a community they were now a part of, strengthening their emotional and psychological investment in the scam. To complete the illusion of a functioning state, Nithyananda went beyond symbols and citizenship and created the entire machinery of a national government. Just like any real country, Kailasa was presented as having a full-fledged cabinet with various ministries, each responsible for a different aspect of national life. The website lists a total of 18 government departments, including familiar ones like the Department of the Treasury, the Department of Commerce, the Department of Housing, and the Department of Health. It even included more, esoteric ones like the Department of Enlightened Civilization. This elaborate bureaucracy was designed to project an image of a well-organized and capable government, ready to manage the affairs of its people. Each of these departments was supposedly based on principles derived from the Vedas, the ancient Hindu scriptures. This was another attempt to cloak the entire operation in a veil of spiritual authenticity and ancient wisdom. The website claims that these departments were not just modern bureaucratic structures, but were a revival of the enlightened administrative systems of the past. This narrative was incredibly appealing to followers who believed they were part of a project to restore a glorious, lost civilization. The ministers and secretaries appointed to run these departments were, of course, Nithyananda's most loyal and high-ranking devotees, rewarded for their blind faith with impressive-sounding but entirely meaningless titles. The creation of this phantom government was a crucial step in preparing for Kailasa's debut on the world stage. It provided a roster of individuals who could be presented as diplomats, ambassadors, and government officials in interactions with real-world entities. When representatives of Kailasa later appeared at United Nations meetings or signed agreements with city councils, they did so under the guise of their official titles within this fictional government structure. This gave their fraudulent activities an air of officialdom, making it easier to deceive unsuspecting politicians and officials who failed to perform even the most basic due diligence. Ultimately, this entire government was a bureaucracy built on belief. It had no power, no authority, and no territory to govern. Its ministries managed no services, and its officials had no real duties other than to perpetuate the lie. It was a hollow shell, a Potemkin village constructed in the digital realm to serve the singular purpose of protecting its fugitive founder. By creating a government that looked real on paper, Nithyananda was able to build a human shield of officials and diplomats that he could deploy around the world to further his scam, transforming his personal cult into what appeared to be an international political entity. After meticulously constructing his digital nation, Nithyananda embarked on his most audacious phase yet, seeking international credibility. The online presence, the fake passports, and the phantom government were merely the internal scaffolding. To truly legitimize Kailasa, he needed to project its existence outward and gain some form of recognition from the real world. To achieve this, he started dispatching his most devoted followers, now rebranded as the official diplomats of Kailasa, to meet with officials of other countries. This was a calculated campaign of deception, designed to manufacture a veneer of international relations. These so-called diplomats were armed with nothing more than false stories, fabricated credentials, and an unwavering belief in their fugitive guru's divine mission. These envoys of a non-existent nation successfully managed to infiltrate various political and social circles. Their primary tactic was to present Kailasa as a legitimate Hindu island nation, often vaguely located near Ecuador, and to portray themselves as representatives of a persecuted religious minority seeking solidarity and support. They targeted local politicians, city councils, and cultural organizations, entities that were less likely to have the resources to conduct thorough background checks on a seemingly benign spiritual group. Their goal was simple: get a meeting, take a photo, and secure a document, any document, that could be spun as a form of recognition. The photographic evidence of these meetings became Kailasa's most potent propaganda tool. Every handshake, every shared stage, every signed certificate was immediately posted on social media and the official Kailasa website. These images were presented as proof that Kailasa was actively engaging in diplomacy and being recognized by the international community. For followers and potential donors, this created a powerful feedback loop of legitimacy. The photos seemed to validate Nithyananda's claims, making the entire enterprise appear more credible and successful than it actually was. It was a classic disinformation strategy: create the illusion of recognition to attract more support, which in turn funds more attempts to create the illusion. This diplomatic charade peaked in a series of high-profile stunts that left the world both baffled and, honestly, a bit alarmed. In October 2022, Kailasa managed to get a full-page advertisement complete with large photos of Nithyananda, included in the official brochure for a Diwali party held at Britain's prestigious House of Lords. Supporters of Nithyananda were also present at the event, mingling with prominent figures. Following the party, the Kailasa UK Twitter account boasted about celebrating Diwali with members of the British Parliament. This was how the scam operated. By inserting itself into legitimate events, it sought to borrow credibility and create an association with established institutions, fooling the world one photo op at a time. The international scam reached its breathtaking apex in February 2023, when Kailasa's representatives managed to infiltrate a meeting of the United Nations in Geneva, Switzerland. This was the ultimate stage for Nithyananda's grand delusion. A woman named Vijayapriya Nityananda, one of his most trusted devotees, attended a public meeting of the UN Committee on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, CSCR. She took the floor and with astonishing composure, introduced herself as the permanent ambassador of the United States of Kailasa to the United Nations. The moment was surreal. A representative of a country that did not exist was addressing an official body of the world's foremost international organization. In her statement, Vijayapriya spun a well-rehearsed tale of persecution and spiritual sovereignty. She declared that Kailasa was the first sovereign state for Hindus, established by the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism, Nithyananda Paramashivam. She then proceeded to use this international platform to launch an attack on India, accusing the country of persecuting her fugitive guru. She claimed that Nithyananda was being targeted for reviving the ancient traditions of Hinduism, and pleaded with the UN to take action to end the persecution against him and the 2 million Hindu diaspora population of Kailasa. Everyone in the room, and the world watching online, was left stunned by the sheer audacity of the spectacle. How was this even possible? The answer lies in the open nature of certain UN meetings. The event was a public discussion day where participation is open to the public and NGOs. Kailasa's representatives had likely registered as an NGO or simply as interested members of the public, allowing them to gain access and a speaking slot. The UN officials present were caught completely off guard, having no reason to suspect that the speaker represented a fictional nation run by a fugitive from justice. The stunt was a glaring indictment of the procedural loopholes that could be exploited by determined and well-funded scam artists. The aftermath of the UN appearance was a propaganda victory for Kailasa. The organization immediately broadcast clips of the speech across all its social media channels, presenting it as proof that the United Nations had formally recognized Kailasa and was listening to its grievances. They framed it as a major diplomatic triumph, a moment where their nation was finally given a voice on the world stage. While UN officials later clarified that the committee had not recognized Kailasa and that its submissions would be disregarded, the damage was done. For a brief shining moment, Nithyananda had successfully turned a UN meeting into a promotional event for his international scam. While the United Nations stunt grabbed global headlines, Nithyananda's followers, were actually running a pretty sophisticated scam operation in the United States at the same time. They targeted local governments with these proposals for sister city agreements. In January 2023, they actually pulled off a major coup. The city of Newark, which is a major urban center in New Jersey, went ahead and signed a formal sister city agreement with the completely fictional United States of Kailasa. The signing ceremony was, well, a full-fledged event, attended by the mayor of Newark, Ras Baraka, and other city officials, who even posed for photos with the saffron-clad representatives of Kailasa. The fake diplomats had managed to dupe the leadership of an American city, lending their credibility to the scam. The Kailasa representatives approached the Newark City Council with a really convincing pitch, describing Kailasa as a Hindu island nation off the coast of Ecuador, dedicated to humanitarian causes. The politicians in New Jersey, eager to engage with what they thought was a culturally rich and benevolent new partner, apparently didn't even do the most basic verification. They just took the claims at face value and enthusiastically signed the agreement, celebrating this new cultural exchange with a country that, honestly, existed only on a website. It was a shocking failure of due diligence and, honestly, a testament to how persuasive Nithyananda's well-coached emissaries could be. Of course, the moment the truth came out in the media, Newark was suddenly engulfed in a storm of public embarrassment and ridicule. City officials had to admit their mistake, and a councilman even called the whole thing a massive oversight. Just a few days after the agreement was signed, the city council held an emergency vote to rescind it, quickly cutting all ties with the Phantom Nation. But for Nithyananda, the damage was already done, and honestly, it was exactly the kind he wanted. On its website, Kailasa proudly displayed the now-cancelled Sister City Agreement as proof of American recognition for the entire country of Kailasa, conveniently leaving out the fact that the agreement had been swiftly nullified. The Newark incident, though, was not a one-off. It was actually part of a bigger strategy to gain some kind of legitimacy in the West. Kailasa's representatives reportedly approached dozens of other cities and towns across the United States with similar proposals. While most saw through the ruse, the fact that they succeeded even once really shows just how vulnerable local governments can be to these kinds of well-orchestrated scams. The American hustle was a key part of Nithyananda's plan to build up a whole portfolio of fake diplomatic achievements, bit by bit, hoping that the sheer number of these fraudulent agreements would eventually create this undeniable illusion of legitimacy. The international deception campaign didn't stop with North America. In 2023, Nithyananda's devotees actually managed to fool a high-ranking official in the government of Paraguay, which is a sovereign nation in South America. After a series of meetings with Kailasa's so-called diplomats, Arnaldo Chamorro, the chief of staff for Paraguay's agriculture minister, went on to sign an official memorandum of understanding with this completely phantom nation. This was, honestly, a pretty big step up from a city-level agreement. The document itself was breathtaking in its scope, outlining a plan for setting up diplomatic relations between Paraguay and Kailasa, a partnership that could have had some pretty far-reaching implications. Now, the agreement even had a clause that was a massive win for Nithyananda's ambitions. In it, Paraguay supposedly agreed to actively support Kailasa's bid for recognition and membership in various international bodies, including the United Nations itself. That would have meant a recognized sovereign nation was officially lobbying on behalf of a fictional one. In return for this diplomatic support, Kailasa's representatives promised Paraguay help with things like agricultural technology and irrigation systems. Expertise that, let's be honest, a nation with no land, no farmers, and no scientists just couldn't possibly have. It was a classic con, promising imaginary solutions in exchange for real political support. But as with all of Kailasa's schemes, this one just couldn't withstand even a little bit of scrutiny. Once news of the agreement became public, it triggered a political firestorm in Paraguay. The government was hugely embarrassed, and the official who had signed the deal, Arnaldo Chamorro, was quickly fired for his spectacular lapse in judgment. He later admitted he had been tricked, saying that the Kailasa representatives had presented themselves as leaders of a legitimate nation, and he'd been totally duped by their elaborate presentation. The Paraguayan government quickly nullified the agreement and distanced itself from Nithyananda and his phantom state, but the whole incident was yet another alarming example of Kailasa's global reach. Over time, Nithyananda's followers got so confident in their ability to fool officials that they actually started planning the final, most critical step for their so-called nation: getting actual land. After all those international meetings and the strong online presence, Kailasa still lacked the one thing every country needs: territory. And that led them to their most audacious plot yet. In 2024, members of Kailasa, posing as tourists and humanitarian workers, traveled to Bolivia in South America. There, they began a covert operation to lure indigenous tribes living in the Amazon rainforest into signing over huge swaths of their ancestral lands, a plan that almost succeeded. The plan to grab land in Bolivia was really the culmination of Kailasa's entire international scam. To make their offer seem more legit, members of Nithyananda's team first managed to get a photo opportunity with the Bolivian president, Luis Arce. They then used this picture as a tool to impress and gain the trust of remote indigenous communities. One member of a native tribe, Pedro Guasico, later shared how the Kailasa members approached his community. They started off by offering to help fight a local forest fire, a gesture of goodwill that was clearly meant to build trust. Once they had established a relationship, they started talking about leasing the tribe's land. The deal they proposed sounded, well, almost too good to be true. The Kailasa members promised to pay the tribe $200,000 every year in exchange for a 25-year lease on their territory. The land in question was a massive tract of the Amazon rainforest, reportedly 3 times the size of New Delhi. For the financially struggling tribe, this looked like a real lifeline. Between September and November of 2024, Kailasa's representatives actually negotiated similar lease agreements with at least 4 different tribal groups in Bolivia. Everything was going exactly according to Nithyananda's plan. His imaginary country, which had only ever existed online and in the minds of his followers, was on the verge of acquiring its own physical territory. But the deception was hidden in the fine print. When the Kailasa members brought the final lease agreement for the tribes to sign, it was written entirely in English, a language the tribal leaders didn't even understand. A closer look at the document revealed just how predatory the deal really was. The lease wasn't for 25 years as promised, but for a staggering 1,000 years. On top of that, the agreement gave Kailasa complete and total sovereignty and autonomy over the leased land. This included control over everything from the airspace above to all the natural resources below the ground. The land would, in effect, become a sovereign enclave of Kailasa within Bolivia. And it gets even more outrageous. The agreement said that if Kailasa was ever attacked, the native Bolivian tribes would be contractually obligated to defend Kailasa's sovereignty and independence. They'd also be required to support Kailasa's bid to join the United Nations. Just as this massive land grab was about to be finalized, the entire scam was exposed by the courageous investigative work of journalists at a Bolivian newspaper. They uncovered the plot and brought the shocking details to the Bolivian public. The resulting outcry forced the Bolivian government to step in, cancel all the lease agreements, and arrest 20 people connected to Kailasa, who were then deported, not to their fictional country, but to their actual home countries. The grand plan had finally blown up. Even after the spectacular collapse of his land grab scheme in Bolivia, and the global ridicule that followed, the bizarre saga of Swami Nityananda is far from over. As of June 2025, this fraud Baba remains a fugitive from Indian justice, and his precise whereabouts are still a subject of continued speculation. No one knows for certain where he is hiding, yet his presence is somehow more pervasive than ever. New videos are still published on his official YouTube channel with, honestly, startling regularity. There are frequent live streams where he appears not as a man on the run, but as a triumphant king. Seated on an ornate golden throne, draped in regal attire, he continues to present himself as a living god, delivering animated speeches from his secret, unknown location to a global audience of believers. The grand nation of Kailasa, exposed to the world as a sham, has simply adapted its marketing. After being thoroughly mocked for its claims of being a physical place, the narrative has shifted. If you were to visit the Kailasa website today, you would find it carefully described as a cosmic, borderless nation. The language has been altered to suggest that it represents not a physical territory but a global, ideological movement. It is now proudly hailed as the world's greatest digital Hindu nation, which is, honestly, a clever rebranding that allows the scam to continue by admitting that its kingdom exists only online. It's a tacit acknowledgement of the lie spun into a new, supposedly more profound truth for his followers. The entire enterprise has been reduced to a digital farce, yet it persists with an unsettling vitality. Kailasa's so-called digital embassy can be found in your spam folder. Its external affairs ministry is run through Photoshop, and its diplomatic corps consists of, well, brainwashed devotees. The number of grandiose titles Nithyananda has bestowed upon himself seems to exceed the actual number of committed citizens in his phantom nation. He is the supreme pontiff, the divine healer, the great reviver of Hinduism, and even the incarnation of ultimate wisdom. These titles are a testament to an ego unbound by reality, a man who has built a kingdom of words and convinced others to live in it with him. The absurdity of the situation is perhaps best captured by Nithyananda's own actions when faced with a real-world problem. In August 2022, while his devotees were being told that he was an immortal being who could conquer death, the Supreme Pontiff himself reportedly fell gravely ill. In a moment of honestly profound irony, the ruler of a cosmic nation with a supposedly advanced healthcare system based on Vedic principles sought urgent medical help in the mortal world. He allegedly requested political asylum in Sri Lanka, hoping to be airlifted into their country to receive modern medical treatment. The divine being, it turned out, still needed human doctors and the infrastructure of a real country to survive. The story of Nithyananda and Kailasa is more than just the tale of a clever con man. It's actually a pretty profound and honestly disturbing case study in the psychology of belief. How can a man accused of such horrific crimes, rape, torture, kidnapping, and who makes such patently absurd claims, continue to command the loyalty of thousands of followers, including educated and wealthy individuals? Well, the answer lies in a complex interplay of human vulnerability, psychological manipulation, and the powerful allure of certainty in an uncertain world. Nithyananda did not just sell spirituality, he sold a complete, all-encompassing reality, offering simple answers to life's most complex questions. For many followers, Nithyananda provides a sense of purpose and belonging that they lack in their everyday lives. He offers them entry into an exclusive community, an enlightened group that possesses a secret knowledge the rest of the world is too blind to see. This creates a powerful us versus them mentality. When the outside world presents evidence of his crimes, it is not seen as proof of his guilt, but as a confirmation of the world's ignorance and hostility. The accusations become a test of faith, and defending the guru against these attacks actually strengthens their commitment and their bond with the community, making them feel like holy warriors defending a divine cause. Furthermore, Nithyananda is a master of exploiting deep-seated hopes and fears. To those suffering from incurable illnesses, he offers the promise of a miraculous cure. To those feeling lost or powerless, he offers supernatural abilities and the key to cosmic secrets. To those anxious about their cultural identity, he offers the chance to revive a glorious Hindu civilization. These are powerful promises that appeal directly to our most basic human desires. Once a person has invested their hopes, their time, and their money into this belief system, it becomes incredibly difficult to walk away. To admit that it was all a lie would be to admit one's own foolishness, a painful psychological blow that many are unwilling to face. This phenomenon is known as cognitive dissonance. When people are confronted with evidence that contradicts their deeply held beliefs, they experience mental discomfort. To resolve this, they often choose to reject the evidence rather than their belief. They will rationalize, deny, and reinterpret facts to fit their existing worldview. Nithyananda's followers who have seen him up close say he is little more than a cheap magician, performing simple tricks to lure people into his web. But for those already caught, every trick is a miracle, every lie is a profound truth, and every crime is a cosmic test, a narrative that protects their psychological investment in the man they have chosen to call God. The bizarre scam of Kailasa is a distinctly modern phenomenon, a perfect storm created by the intersection of ancient religious fervor, sophisticated modern technology, and gaping loopholes in international law and governance. Nithyananda's success demonstrates how a determined charlatan can weaponize these three elements to build a global empire of deceit. Religion provided him with the raw material, a pre-existing belief system, powerful symbols, and a narrative of persecution that he could co-opt for his own purposes. By wrapping himself in the saffron robes of a Hindu monk and calling himself a guru, he was able to command a level of trust and reverence that would be impossible for an ordinary criminal. Technology was the engine that powered his global expansion. The internet allowed him to bypass traditional gatekeepers and broadcast his message directly to millions of people around the world. Social media platforms became his propaganda machine, allowing him to create a carefully curated image of a divine leader with a massive global following. The professional website for Kailasa, with its slick design and official-looking content, was a masterstroke of digital deception. It created an illusion of legitimacy so powerful that it fooled city officials, government ministers, and even managed to get his representatives a speaking slot at the United Nations. Technology allowed him to build a nation that was, for all intents and purposes, a sophisticated digital mirage. Finally, Nithyananda exploited the loopholes in our global systems. He understood that local governments and even international bodies often lack the resources or the will to properly vet every group that approaches them. He took advantage of the open nature of public meetings and the eagerness of politicians to engage in cultural outreach. The 1933 Montevideo Convention, which defines a country, served as his twisted blueprint. While Kailasa met none of the criteria in reality, it has no defined territory, no permanent population, and no functioning government. He created a digital facsimile of each, hoping to blur the lines and confuse the system long enough to gain some form of recognition. His network of NGOs in the United States and other countries provided a legal shield for his financial operations, allowing him to collect millions in donations under the guise of a charitable, religious organization. This complex structure made it difficult for authorities to track the flow of money that was funding his fugitive lifestyle and his global scam. The story of Kailasa is therefore a stark warning about the vulnerabilities of our modern world. It shows how easily faith can be manipulated, how technology can be used to construct alternate realities, and how our legal and diplomatic systems can be tricked by those who are audacious enough to try. Perhaps the most sobering aspect of the Nithyananda saga is the realization that he is not an anomaly. He is merely one of the most flamboyant and successful examples of a phenomenon that persists throughout our society. There are still so many people in our country and around the world who call themselves God-men, who claim to have magical powers, and who use the shield of religion to hide their sins and exploit the vulnerable. From those who claim to be non-biological to those who promise to cure any disease with a pinch of sacred ash, the playbook is remarkably consistent. They prey on desperation, offer simplistic solutions to complex problems, and demand absolute, unquestioning faith. The persistence of such figures points to a collective failure in our society, a failure to foster critical thinking and scientific temperament. We live in an age of unprecedented scientific advancement, yet a significant portion of the population remains susceptible to medieval superstitions and magical thinking. People still hope for miracles from these babas, expecting them to solve problems that can only be addressed through hard work, education, and scientific progress. It is a certainty that when a cure for cancer is finally developed, it will not come from a so-called God-man sermon. It will come from the painstaking research of dedicated scientists in a laboratory. Instead of placing our trust in these conmen, it is far more empowering to be confident in our own abilities and to invest in ourselves. The path to a better life does not lie in surrendering our will to a charismatic guru, but in actively seeking knowledge, learning new skills, and developing our own critical faculties. This not only benefits us as individuals, but also strengthens society as a whole, making it more resilient to the manipulations of demagogues and charlatans, whether they be religious, political, or otherwise. A populace that thinks critically is the greatest defense against the tyranny of falsehood. The lesson from Nithyananda's rise and the enduring support for him is that the battle against blind faith is an ongoing one. His followers were not all uneducated or unintelligent. They included doctors, engineers, and CEOs. This shows that no one is immune. The allure of easy answers and the comfort of belonging to a special group can override even the most rational mind. Until we, as a society, prioritize education that teaches how to think rather than just what to think, we will continue to see new Nithyanandas rise from the ashes of the old ones, ready to exploit the same human frailties for their own selfish gain. Ultimately, the bizarre and troubling story of Nithyananda and his phantom nation of Kailasa serves as a powerful and urgent call to action. It is a call for vigilance, for skepticism, and above all, for critical thinking. The most effective antidote to the poison spread by such frauds is not censorship or outrage, but a well-informed and questioning public. We must cultivate the habit of asking questions, of demanding evidence, and of being wary of anyone who claims to have all the answers, especially when those answers are wrapped in the cloak of divine authority. Protecting ourselves and our communities from such scams begins with empowering the individual mind. It is crucial that we raise awareness among the masses about the tactics used by these manipulative figures. We need to talk openly about how they exploit religious sentiments, how they create insulated cult-like environments, and how they use psychological manipulation to gain and maintain control over their followers. By demystifying their methods, we can strip them of their power. When people understand the playbook, they are far less likely to fall for the game. This education should start early, teaching children the difference between healthy faith and dangerous blind devotion, and encouraging them to approach extraordinary claims with a healthy dose of skepticism. The responsibility also lies with the media and with our institutions to be more diligent. As we have seen, Nithyananda's scam was enabled in part by the failure of officials and organizations to do their homework. A simple Google search would have revealed the extensive criminal allegations against him, yet cities and even the UN were duped. We must demand a higher standard of accountability and due diligence from our leaders and public bodies. The media too has a role to play, not just in reporting on these scams after they have been exposed, but in actively investigating and questioning the claims of self-proclaimed godmen before they can build their empires. In the end, the future of Nithyananda may be uncertain, but our path forward must be clear. We must champion reason over superstition, evidence over assertion, and inquiry over obedience. The fight against frauds like Nithyananda is a fight for the integrity of our society and for the protection of its most vulnerable members. Let his story be a permanent reminder that the most powerful shield against deception is a mind that dares to question. Let us be a society that invests not in fraudulent babas, but in education, in science, and in the boundless potential of the critical human intellect. Thank you very much.